Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Zero Sum podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Moog. I am very happy and thrilled to be sitting here today with Graham Westbrook, who is a old-ish friends of mine, somebody that I've got a chance to spend some time with over the last few years and have really gotten to enjoy being around and hearing from and collaborating with. So first of all, thanks so much for being on the pod, Graham. Appreciate you being here.
So glad to be here. Yeah, excited to dig in, man.
Awesome. So you're an interesting dude. I sort of view you as sort of the James Bond of security. Like you're like an international man of mystery. You're doing all this crazy stuff.
Martin yet?
What's that?
I know Aston Martin yet. So
well, sell some stock and make some money.
Wow.
But your day job is you're VP of International at SimSpace, which is a global cyber range company, which we can get into. But also, you do advisement. You've worked at interesting companies like CrowdStrike and Flashpoint. And then you also went overseas to Oxford and got your postgrad in AI, which I think is hyper impressive and really cool, and would love to hear about that. But overall, I just think you have a very broad perspective on AI, security, globalization, all these sorts of things, which I love, because I like to think about, the rest of the world outside of Silicon Valley. I spent a lot of time talking to founders and people that live in sort of AI land, but like you go to regular America and people are like figuring it out, and you go international, I'm assuming it's even more figuring it out. So I guess we can start there. With all you're seeing and your travels around the world and learning about AI, like where do you think we're at? Like where do you think the cyber industry is at? When you talk to people, are you nervous, happy, anxious, thrilled? Like where are you at with it?
So one thing I've seen when I travel internationally is, of course, that most organizations, developing nations, are 5 to 10 years behind most U.S. organizations. So when you look at finance, fintech, technology firms, ministries of defense, things like that, they're close, but a lot are farther behind. What I do, though, is I love establishing relationships with the people. I want to honor cultures. I want to take the humans seriously. Like I'm less concerned with sort of like making sure that they understand cybersecurity like I do, and more challenging assumptions to say, hey, you're the Coast Guard. You should probably think about incursions into the Senkaku Islands and how to take cybersecurity seriously. So I like to learn a little bit. Like, for example, in Japanese, just learn enough to start the meeting. Yoroshiku onegai shimasu, and just really say like, hey, hajime mashite, nice to meet you. Good to sort of honor your culture, and then from there establish trust. In terms of sort of where we are, I think Mythos and a couple other critical call it watershed moments were where people started to pay attention. When I would go to certain nations, Japan, Singapore, I'm trying to think, maybe Bulgaria, Bosnia, like there's this sort of AI reticence, right? But all of a sudden it's been shifting because people are starting to say, okay, I should pay attention to this. It's happening at machine speed. If you can identify vulnerabilities and potential exploits in, call it a day now, rather than a month or a year, then humans can't respond fast enough. They're starting to ask the right questions. So that's where I think we're at. We're at the moment of awareness where people realize that legacy SOC is no longer sufficient, and we need to transform something toward next gen security operations.
It's interesting because when you delve into the world of AI startups, they're pretending, acting, hoping that we're there. And I just talk to regular people at regular companies, and they're like, yeah, we're thinking about it. Like, we're looking at it. We know it's out there. It's like this, and I think there's two sides of that coin. One is the threat side, right? Which is like bad actors using AI to mess with me. And the other is obviously defensive side of like, can I build these capabilities? And your CFO throwing a spreadsheet into Claude isn't AI, isn't like, it's just a tool that they're using to do a job.
Right.
So I'm interested because your world incorporates sort of battlefield AI, if you will, like government level AI. How are you seeing those worlds come together? Like, are you seeing governments pay attention to startups, or are they sort of going like, we'll wait till Microsoft has this? Like, where is that at?
Well, I can't say for exactly who, but of course we're doing things like offensive mission rehearsal. So call it active cyber defense, and those can be classified high side use cases where folks are evaluating how to counter adversary influence. I think those are very, very real. So of course governments are asking which are the startups that happen to have the access, the intelligence, and the capability to bring to bear. I mean, what comes to mind are folks like Silent Push, identifying indicators of future attack. They're identifying, attacker infrastructure being set up before the attack commences. Forrester and Gartner are calling that preemptive cyber defense. I'm a huge believer in taking action before an action happens against you. So when I step into these ministries of defense, the conversation is shifting from human first, AI in the loop, to AI first, human in the loop, or even human on the loop. And so they're asking questions of like, how can I identify things preemptively? How can I sort of simulate an attack and patch something before I get impacted in a production environment? That's the only way we're going to keep pace or outpace adversaries using AI at machine speed. So, the short answer is of course yes.
It's interesting because in some ways, like a lot of technology waves, AI is a distinctly American wave, but you're seeing this other motion of like the Chinese AI, open source AI. And one of the things that we talk a lot about in the kind of more corporate side of the world is, the idea that everybody's going to keep using the 4 or 5 different models is probably not true. Like at the end of the day, people are going to build their own AIs. But I suppose in government, and tell me I'm stupid if this isn't true, but that becomes even more critical
Yeah.
because if you all of a sudden find yourself on the wrong side of America's lens, your AI is off. Like that's not, you got to have your own capable. It's like having your own power generation. Like you need it.
Yeah.
So are you seeing that manifest itself in the
Yes.
world?
In fact, there's a famous article. It's something like Sam Altman versus Jamie Dimon, right? It's this concept of like, right now we're in this phase 2 of evaluating the models themselves. But in phase 3, what they're proposing is it becomes more about the organization itself. JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, US Cyber Command, Filipino Cyber Command, they're going to have their own models built on top of their own data and their own infrastructure. We're not quite there yet, but I'm absolutely seeing the early kind of vestiges of that trajectory. So I think that as everyone sort of up levels their understanding of what artificial and machine learning actually means, and deep neural networks, and what's the difference between an LLM and a small language model, right? These are all things that are helping us to sort of think about the problem in a more sophisticated way. But I'm thrilled at the prospect of organizations building even better agents on top of their own data, and not just simply subscribing to a token model from OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever, and sort of outsourcing some of that expertise. My sort of secret hunch is, instead of artificial intelligence and LLMs making people less intelligent, I think it's going to force some people to focus on the more complex, sophisticated problems that only humans can influence. Fine, let AI automate the basics. Autonomous SOC agents automating tier 1 and tier 2 of SOC triage. But let's now focus on, what about the behavioral elements? How do humans now interact with agentic loops? You might have heard there's something called consent fatigue, right? Like if there's an analyst now plugged in and needing to approve, this looks suspicious or malicious, right? Like they're getting to the point like, I don't know. I don't want it to, we need to sort of zoom out and say, maybe the size of the security team changes, but the size of the security team stays the same, but the roles change. And so maybe you have like integrity analysts and agentic model operators, and like, so you can see how things can evolve without it feeling so like end of the world, doom and gloom kind of vibes.
Yeah, it's interesting because talking to people doing this, and also in just my day job, there is an incredible anger about AI, especially in the States, of like using it as justification for layoffs or whatever. Like, and that's a problem set that is, a very complicated one, because some of it's true, some of it's not. Like, I get all those sorts of things. But this fear of like we're all going to be sort of jobless, maybe someday, but like today, that's certainly not true. But I've heard it, to your point, referenced as like data shepherd. I've heard it referenced as like, AI architect, whatever, like just like feeding and nurturing these on-prem AIs that like run our businesses, right? Because I fundamentally don't see any world where Chase and B of A share AI. It's just like, it's not going to happen. Like, it's too competitive. Everybody's looking for every angle. If everybody's getting the same answer, it breaks the model. Like, I just don't think that's that interesting. I sort of think of it like zookeeping, right? Of like, you're just feeding the animals and keeping them alive, but like the AI is going to do a lot more. That feels far off, right? It feels like it's years off versus where we are today. So when you go out and talk to customers, people thinking about offensive and defensive AI, like today, like what are they doing? Like, obviously that's future state. Like, what are you seeing day to day?
Today, the basics of what large enterprises are doing are automating tier one. They're implementing, like I said, maybe autonomous SOC agents that are able to do basic triage. Today, small to regional organizations probably haven't implemented any security agent yet. What I propose is this concept of a sort of a AI proving grounds, which is you need a space that looks like you, a simulation space, in order to evaluate new technologies. How do you know what you need, the scalpels that you need for the job? How will you determine whether that new agent, with all the buzzwords, does what it says it's going to do and doesn't break things? That's where we're at. We're at this sort of evaluation inflection point. And most organizations that I've talked to have either not yet implemented security agents or have done basic defensive ones. There are a number of offensive attack agentic platforms like Horizon 3, Scythe, Pike Red, Volnetic, Dreadnode that are doing a really good job at saying, this is how we can emulate the adversary. That I can see being adopted fairly quickly within certain bounds, and especially within some kind of, again, cyber range, pre-production, non-production sandbox. But I think over the next 2 years, you're going to see this sort of like kick the tires on some things, deploy carefully, operationalize fully with policy guardrails. There are some folks like Sondera doing really cool control plane things, which is nerding out for a quick second, using feeder policy language to neuter a request in transit. And so there's almost like these platforms that can operationalize intent. If a CISO says, I don't want it to go outside these bounds, then there's a policy structure a harness, they're calling it, wrapped around specific requests that will disable that from actually doing damage. I think that's where we're headed. My point is, we're still in this phase where most of the people I talk to international, I've been all over the world, are not yet actually implementing agents, but they're starting to ask those questions. When you're faced with the problem, there's a classic stat I like to reference. CrowdStrike back in 2018 said the fastest breakout time, which is the time it takes for malware to successfully enter an organization and start to move laterally. The fastest in the world was 18 minutes in 2018. The fastest now is 27 seconds in 2026. We're rapidly approaching a time where that's near zero. And my point is, humans can't respond fast enough. And when I present that problem, and when I substantiate that problem with evidence, I'm talking large intelligence agencies and MODs all the way down to small enterprises globally are paying attention. They just haven't done anything quite yet.
So that's fascinating to me, because one of the things that I talk a lot about is like, I hate the way we're approaching AI and security, because we're just taking these old, broken, slow processes and going, let's AI them. And I was like, what about fixing it? Like, what about
Uh,
prevention? What about, to your point about like,
leapfrog.
yeah, like why are we rebuilding? Even hearing the terms like level 1, 2, 3 is so wrong. Like, it's not true in the, like, we use that terminology because it's like kind of clueless, pretty good, badass. Like, that's the way we rank people in the SOC. AI is badass top to bottom if you do it right. So like, why are we building these weird sort of levels that don't apply to AI? And then like to your point about the thinking about it, looking at traffic as the way in as opposed to the way out, right? It's like, okay, like, and I know AI is not fast enough to do all this yet, and you require local models, but like, should there be essentially a great firewall stood up in front of companies that are all AI and just know that's stupid, don't do that, like, and just try to traffic of it? It seems like we're missing a beat when we just look at, hey, how do we, like, I was talking to a couple of AppSec people in the last few shows, like, the world doesn't need more vulns. Like, I'm done. Like, it's too noisy. It's going to get out of control if it's not already. And so I think it's really fascinating, um, as kind of a trend point, if you will.
Have you heard of the 0-day clock?
No.
You
What's
should
that?
check that out. Yeah, it's this concept of like we've gone from initial time to identify vulnerability to exploit from like a year to a month to a day, and they say by 2028 likely in a minute. So to your point, it's like we at some level vulns don't matter because
Mhm.
if you're just constantly claiming I just found a vuln and then something can exploit it in a minute, it's more. That's why I come back to that concept of preemptive. We
Mhm.
have to think about it like forecasting the weather. Have you heard of Google GenCast?
Mm-mm.
Okay, it's a way that Google built to forecast the weather with almost 100% accuracy.
Okay.
And what they do is something called probabilistic ensemble analysis, which is like a overcomplicated way of saying forecasting 50 times instead of once.
Mm.
And when you do it that many times, you're doing scenarios analysis. And
Mhm.
when you take the net of 50 scenarios instead of one, you're always more accurate. And so my point is like, it's not just left of bang, it's like before an attack is created. So a lot of my Oxford research has just been like, can I create this sort of reinforcement learning lab, this sort of safe harbor where I can run 1,000 attacks and just
Mm.
continue to iterate. Is this policy better? No. If not, don't optimize. Is this policy better? If yes, push to production, right? This concept of just continuing to optimize preemptively. Because I don't want to wait till the bones. I don't want
Right.
to.
Hmm.
So I think you're right. I think we need to reevaluate how we're thinking about it, because if we're just going to find parity to our bad processes, we're going to create the same problems.
Right. Just bigger, faster, worse than they are today. Right. So it just, you were talking about those loops and sort of testing things and getting smarter preemptively, which I love. So you're spend a lot of time in the world of simulation and cyber ranges and things like that. As I assume, and I'm not in that world, but we used to have to sort of stand up real infrastructure, if you will, right? Like a bunch of VMs, attack them, track it. How much of that can shift into sort of the imagination of AI? Like, do you actually have to build a server, or does it know enough about servers that it will just imagine the attacks and sort of like, what's that bridge today, versus maybe where it was 5 years ago, where like there was no AI, you had to build a server and attack it. How much of it can you do in the imagination of AI?
Conceptually, all of it.
Right. Okay. Okay.
But practically, the reason why converting everything to even containers, like containerizing an entire network and doing sort of like higher level scenarios analysis, the reason why it doesn't totally work is you don't have the data necessary to create the detections from. You don't have what would CrowdStrike or SentinelOne or Palo actually output for me to make sense of. So there's this new trend called hypersynthetic data, which is this
Mhm.
concept of like, let me say it differently. If you have an approximation of reality, it's just as good as reality. So it's kind
Mhm.
of getting at what you're saying. Like, I don't need to digital twin 100,000 VMs for me to create a 1/1000th version of that and create the same level of living, breathing realism, attack
Hmm.
emulation, user emulation, whatever. What I want to do though is I want to have real VMs. I want to have real network segmentation, real boxes, real internet, so that when I create data from those inherent applications, it's not watered down. We need that data. Large hyperscalers need that data to build the correct models in order to even identify, attacks inbound. So again, academically, love the idea of sort of like not having to go down to that level and just saying what if, like a what if machine. But practically, you really do need the real thing, just at a smaller scale that's perhaps more affordable and more efficient to get the data you need to protect yourself.
Interesting. Yeah, because you were talking about weather models, right? Weather models are incredibly complicated, but also working for the most part off known variables, right? Like you kind of know all of the things that equal a storm. Like obviously the data is massive and complicated, but like at the end of the day, like what's going to make it rain in New York is kind of known. And in some level, what's going to make a app server fall over is known. Like, and so you could start, I think, doing some of the same things. To your point about sort of, you've got to do some of it real, how, like, and you're much more of an AI expert than I am, but like, what's that line between like training and operationalizing AI in the sense of like, so if you, so much of security is like, that doesn't belong here, right? So if you look at a million sessions, the million and one is like, that's wrong, right? And AI, I think, is particularly good at that, of like a pattern recognition, which ultimately is like what most of us nerds do with security, like threat hunting, detection, it's just pattern recognition, right? And so like where are you at with like the training data? Can you build a realistic AI defensible system when it's not even trained on your own data? Like going to ask Claude a question, sure, but they don't know what the hell normal is for me. So like how do you bridging that gap in your mind of like, how do I get a company enough normalization data to know what the weather is going to be like tomorrow?
Yeah.
Like, do you watch it or do you sim it? Like, how does that work?
Let me answer that question by way of a quick story.
Mhm.
I have always wanted to be a meteorologist.
Okay.
For whatever reason, like storms fascinate me, right? So that's why I think about the weather concept, and so this idea that storm chasers go out to identify real tornadoes, and like not just like if you've seen Twister, set up a rig and drill it into the ground, which is sort of hyperbolic, and throw up these sort of little sensors, right? Which, by the way, gets real data that I can later go conceptualize. But now people are starting to fly drones into tornadoes. I
Oh,
think about I think about AI in a similar manner, in the sense that we're utilizing new technology to basically deepen our understanding of the problem. That's why I said what I said in terms of like needing real VMs, needing real data in order to like actually protect against it. So to get back to your question, that's I think why I mean you have to sort of build a digital twin or a digital replica of an organization and find what baseline looks for their specific network, users, vertical, um, applications, and then kind of craft autonomous agents on top of it. Like, yeah, how do I know what good looks like? I can't just
mhm.
pull a commercial off the shelf, engine and assume that it knows what bad is. Um, that's kind of why I work for an organization that has a simulation space that is working in parallel with the production environment. I think that proving grounds concept is necessary, but even more so to your point, if every organization is unique, every person is unique, and if I can take an anonymized understanding of that organization and turn it into non-PII, non-customer user emulation, I create this haystack. And then when I deploy in agentic technology and teach them how to find needles, I'm finding needles in a realistic haystack. What I think a lot of problems that are coming up are rooted in is in typical sandboxes, people are trying to find needles in a pile of needles. They're trying to find
Mhm.
malicious things in just a bunch of malicious things. So
Right.
how do you know what bad is like? But
Mm.
then in production, you're doing pen testing and BAS, breach and attack simulation, which is essentially production non-destructive, and pen testing, which is inherently non-destructive. Like you
Mm.
can kind of poke holes, but you're not going to take the domain controller down in a
Right.
production environment. So my point is there's like a neutered, version in production, and there's this like kind of malicious only version in non-prod, which is my long way of saying we need to make a digital replica of each one of these organizations. And I believe we need to create that, again, realistic haystack so that I can identify a normal baseline and then use that to train those agents in production. For me, it's a continuous loop.
So it's, I agree, that makes sense to me. And, you know, one of the things I worry about with AI also is like the things that you're describing start to become sort of rich people problems, if you make sense. Like, yes, Chase can do it, but can like a regular company really model their behavior, train AI agents, and so like, I think at some level we have to learn lessons from the big guys, right, from the Chases and B of A's of the world, and then give it to the world, right, like and go like, oh, we've learned this is what like a normal user session looks like, and then these are the things that go wrong, and until AI probably gets much cheaper and more accessible. So how much of that do you see org level versus also say tech level, right? So like you can in a big enough simulation with enough data kind of know like what a normal strong auth session looks like, or what a normal password reset looks like, or whatever it is. Do you think there's a future in sort of training agentic solutions around like a tech behavior versus like a org level? Like, do we really need to take 50,000 orgs in America and turn them all into AI context to make this work? Or can I go, this is how this is supposed to work, right? There's a, I was talking the other day about, there's a Onion headline came out that said like Americans are now spending 80% of their day entering 6-digit codes into apps. Like that's all we're doing all day, right? And I'm like, well, it's stupid that I can't pick up Claude and go, hey, it's me. And it's me. Like it knows everything about me. This is sort of dumb. Can we scale that? And I think a lot of startups are struggling with this. Like, I'm selling AI to these orgs. I don't really know what I'm doing because nobody does. And it's like, are you stopping an attack? Are you helping them baseline their norm? Are you helping them be preventative? Like, can you train AI enough on a small set to help everybody? Or do you think it has to be every org model?
I don't know.
Yeah, me neither.
But I do know that in today's world, it's not just going to become democratized naturally.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be some kind of financial incentive or monetized structure that allows the big boy findings to get down to the smaller organizations. To your point, so how we get there, I'm not sure. I think that what's good about capitalism is that we're all sort of competing in some, and it's going to become more of a red ocean than a blue ocean, and where there's so much competition that the fastest animal, and the biggest teeth, and that's going to be the one that wins. And as far as how expensive that one gets, it's going to be similar to the CrowdStrike trajectory, where when you price per endpoint, you can have extremely large contracts or extremely small ones that are, appropriately sized for the scale of the organization. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but it's sort of like how do we all benefit from the strides that will inevitably be made, in innovation and technology, without it sort of over prioritizing those with the most money. That's kind of what I heard.
Yeah. So like, use CrowdStrike as an example, right? Like, I think one of the reasons it was so successful is it sort of, maybe this isn't true, but in my perspective on it was like sort of every endpoint is treated the same. whether it was one of a million at a big bank or one of 10 at the smaller company, you're learning everything that CrowdStrike knows across the board, right? Like we're all winning because, yeah, they saw that attack here and they built a rule, and then that rule gets pushed to every endpoint. Therefore, the mom and pop, the lawyer's office with two partners gets the same level of protection as Chase. I don't know, that's not totally true, but like in the sense of like the way what the CrowdStrike promise was, or S1 or any of the EDRs, it seems to not be the case with AI. Like I'm not really hearing that as much in AI security. It becomes more, you're big and special, you can use AI and everybody else can't. That being said, this week, $500 million flowed into endpoint AI. And I think to me, this is part of the reason, right? And I don't know how good those products are going to end up being, but like we need to democratize AI so all the benefits don't flow to the big guys. We already have that problem, right? With tech and like, Google and Microsoft get bigger and bigger and sort of eat the market. But like, do you see a future for that? Of like, do you think somebody can come along and create AI for the everyman training? Or like, I guess more of my question is, I don't know enough about AI training to know how true this is, but do you think that's a sustainable business model? It's like, I'm going to give everybody this AI tool, I'm going to learn from everybody and then centralize it and then push the answers back out.
Yeah, I
Do you
mean,
think that's a realistic approach?
yes, because what you just described is essentially what CrowdStrike does with their threat graph.
Right.
What you do is if you have enough endpoints, agents deployed all over various countries, organizations, and then anonymize that data, you basically have forward deployed intelligence, or whatever you want to call it, on what's happening live in pockets of the world, what attacks are happening. So I would imagine it would be similar, as if you have essentially that's the benefit of a centrally located, mega player,
Mm-hmm.
mega AI player, is that you can sort of hoover it all up and look at it in some kind of behavioral graph to say, oh, this works, this doesn't. Push this optimization, don't push this one. If it's more clustered and there's all these sort of ankle biters who aren't sharing intelligence, by the way, then it's just going to develop more slowly. The risk of that is, as you can see, China is developing regardless,
Mm-hmm.
is going as fast as possible with new open models, robotics, and to some extent outpacing American technologies, because we've been a little bit more closed off,
Right.
they call it walled garden, or,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm concerned because it's inherently an arms race,
Mm-hmm.
and we are driving toward the fastest possible outcome, regardless of what that outcome looks like or does to people, or does the. So I just think that's inherently a problem in and of itself. You can go look up Project 2027, which is a whole can of worms.
Okay.
Which ultimately has like multiple different courses of action of like, if there's a global, almost like mutually assured destruction with
Mm-hmm.
nukes, like if we all choose to sort of keep each other in check, then there's this scenario. If it's an arms race that's as fast as possible, let's just say it doesn't end well when you do game theory. I'm just not as much of like, doom is counterproductive. I don't want to spend my time wondering and worrying rather than simply trying to be part of the solution. I want to stop attacks faster.
Mm-hmm.
I want to up level and upskill good humans to not just understand cybersecurity basics, but be aware of the transformation journey and how we can actually leapfrog capabilities, as you said earlier. I want us all to be more thoughtful rather than outsourcing our brains to LLMs. Like these are idealistic
Mm-hmm.
desires, but for me, I'm like, I've just always been more of an optimist. I can't look at the problem and just be like, well, it's the end of humanity. Like I just need to look at it more like, regardless of if the big players win or the small players win and how we get there, I can be part of my little solution right
Mm-hmm.
where I'm in my community here with you, by advocating for things that I believe in. All right, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, I love it. It's funny because you're talking game theory, and that's like why I call this zero sum, because
Oh,
I hate the idea of like security having a winner and a loser. Like we were talking earlier before we started about community. Like I still fundamentally like get a little nauseous sometimes that the over commercialization of security. Not that I'm some idealistic bullshitter either, but like I do believe in sort of the tenets of like open information and sharing threat data and forward deployed intelligence, and like, I know that happens at a street level. People are still sharing data and talking about these threats and things that matter. Uh, but I do think there's this like new hyper greed angle where it's like, if you have a thought, it has to be monetized. And I don't love that. Like, I'm like, is that really the right approach to this? And to your point, I do think it hurts us. I do think, even now with like the centralization of the models, right? Like, I fundamentally believe like local is better, control is better. Like, you should control your AI and your decision engines. But I understand the gravity of LLMs. But then when they get on TV or CNBC and start talking about the evil of open source or be scared of it, like, all right, Dario, like calm down. Like it's not, I know it's an existential threat to them monetizing tokens, but like I fundamentally believe like we should have AI decision engines in these companies to make security decisions. Like I believe that. I'm not a doom and gloom person either. I just worry about incentives. Like that's what scares me the most.
well
Not the technology,
then
it's the incentives around it.
no, I get your point. I just think in that case, we have to incentivize positive behaviors by exploiting greed, exploiting ego.
Yeah.
Like, here's an example. We were at RSA, we meaning SimSpace, but we set up at RSA a couple years ago. We set up this booth that in hindsight was freaking brilliant. It was a training gym. So people coming by, we would basically challenge you walking by, be like, can you do 10 pull-ups? Can you deadlift 100 pounds? How many times can you curl it? We put a leaderboard together, and it won top 10 most visited booths in the whole on the whole floor.
Mm-hmm.
Like and my whole point is not that like everybody should go and do that necessarily. It's that when you exploit ego, like you have to sort of look at what is in the cybersecurity space. We have a lot of egotistical people that are like,
No, that's crazy.
right. But it's so I have the new idea. I'm the bet. Like, and when you find a way to exploit that for something good, almost like, hey, we're going to go work out together, but you're going to try to beat the guy that just came with you from your competitive company. It results in something that actually has like a net positive outcome. That's what I mean, is if we can find ways to say like the outputs and the outcomes of the things that we learn in AI are somehow monetized to make people better, organizations faster, and not just be he or she who has the most money wins, then we can get somewhere. But again, that's how I think about problems.
Yeah. I love that. I love the idea of, in a environment where, shame ain't what it used to be, and being embarrassed isn't necessarily what it used to be when it's compared to money. I still believe in the power of peer pressure and competition, and like if you sort of get embarrassed into it, you will do it, right? And so like I think that is one of the powers of like social media is maybe one of the last checks and balances we have is like getting put on blast on Facebook or LinkedIn, right? Like you get out of line. And that hurts your wallet, and therefore it keeps you in line. Like, so I do agree in that. I'm interested in the other side of that a little bit because I was reading and sort of prep for this. And I think you worked on this, but if not, it's still sort of a SimSpace thing.
Yeah.
This idea of confidence, right? You went out and you're like 80 something or 78% or something like that of people were very sure of their defenses and their AI capability. And then when you tested it, it was like much lower.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is just incredibly toxic in AI is like sycophantic AI. like like you're amazing. Like everything you ask it, like, and I fall for this. I'm sure you do too sometimes, where it's like, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
And then you'll literally ask it the opposite. Like, well, tell me what sucks about it.
Yeah.
And they're like, it was
You're
a
right.
terrible idea. And I'm
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
what are we doing? This is
Yeah.
insane.
Yeah.
How are you, like, you're a student of AI. Like, how are you thinking about that side of like confidence, sort of untethering from reality, all these things that happen with AI?
Yeah, it's a tricky question. It reminds me of that Simpsons episode too, where I think it's like Marge keeps asking, what about this spaghetti global? It just keeps reinforcing. Yeah, it's a fantastic idea.
Yeah, you're amazing.
Yeah, and that's, I think Grok for a while had unhinged mode. Do you remember that, or do you know what I'm talking about? It would like
No.
basically yell at you instead of
Okay.
giving you. So obviously that's an overcompensation in the wrong
Right.
direction. But there's this sort of like, my wife, for example, hates the way that AI sounds.
Mhm.
There's sort of this like, sycophantic, I'm your best friend scientist vibe. And you and I have talked about this before, that each LLM sort of has their own personality slightly. But regardless, when you take these LLMs that are hoovering up Reddit posts and forums and blogs for the past 30 years and fragmenting it into something that resembles a human response, it's strange to the brain to try to make sense of that, because you're like, am I dealing with a person? In some ways this is a synthesis of a lot of different people,
Mhm.
but the output is almost like an artificial god, and people are like, wow, this is so. I think if I were to answer your question, it's not that I know how to solve it, it's that I'm trying to remind people that this is not some intelligence magic in the sky.
Right.
This is prediction. And this is, to your point, pattern recognition. This is synthesis of a lot of human work over the last 30 years to have created this data set in the beginning, to begin with. So I have to just sort of remind people, like, don't acquiesce to the perceived superiority of these sycophantic things. I use it as a sidekick, a co-pilot, a sort of a thought provoker, but I never use it as the end all. I never use it as the authority. And that's maybe what almost we need to remind each other of as humans, as like the deeper you get into this, it's just prediction. It's just predicting the next token, the next word.
Right.
AI has never felt anything. It's not emotional. It's not sentient. It's always coming back to stasis, whereas people are always in motion. Even our cells.
Mm.
There's inherent differences we have to remind ourselves so as not to buy in to the addictive, sycophantic nature of AI. But again, I sound more like a televangelist than a sort of a cybersecurity thought leader. But I'm
Well, I
trying
think,
that.
but if you take those concepts, so now I'll give you sort of an example, right? So if you give Claude a marketing plan, and you're like, I want to do this, it'll tell you you're amazing. Just by default, it'll tell you you're amazing. All right. You can make it say it's not, but like by default. And then, two real examples from my life, I had like a health scare, right? Where I had a growth in my thyroid, and I was like, oh, I'm going to die. And then you ask AI and it's like, yeah, you're going to die. Like immediately, it's like you have like a 97% chance that you're going to die. And it was like, you have cancer. And it was like, oh God. And then you go to the doctor, like, that's stupid. That's like, she's like, I see this every day and it's totally fine. And then, I was dealing with like a legal thing, and it's like, that's a brilliant legal argument. And then if you make it, it'll come back around and tell you that's a terrible argument and there's no precedent. And like, so it starts off with this, like, you're great, and works your way to it. So see the consequences start to ratchet up, right? Because then you're going from like marketing plan, who really gives a shit, to like health matters, legal stuff matters. And then you get into security, where it's like, if you give Claude your security plan for 2026, by default, it will tell you it's good. It just will. It'll be like, you're fucking genius. What a great plan. your CIO will love it, blah, blah. And then you ask a follow-up question. Like, what if they tell me this sucks? And they're like, yeah, it probably is pretty bad and you need to improve it. Like, why didn't you say that a token ago? And so, like, in the depths of AI, I worry about that first initial, yeah, you're great, in the sense of like an attack. You're fine. This is normal data. Well, and you ask it a follow-up question, like, actually, no, you're screwed. You're under attack.
Yeah.
Like, what is it about AI that does that? And then how do we sort of as security professionals almost turn that off in your mind? Like, how do we get past that? Where it's like, you're safe. Or by the way, inverse, if you show it a packet analysis, it'll be like, you're being attacked and you're not. Like, and so you get all these, like, it's beyond false positive, false negative. It's like sycophantic security where it's like, whatever your assumption is, it's going to validate that assumption.
Yeah. Are you familiar with, like, in Claude, how you can create a project and then set up a master prompt and a system prompt?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
I think we have to build in those same kind of mechanisms. I mean, this is where historically industry regulation and governance matters.
Well, not anymore. We're past that era of regulation, right? That's not where we live anymore.
True, but think about like how the MITRE Attack Navigator evolved into MITRE Atlas, evolved into MITRE Occult. What I mean is, like, if we are leveraging best practices by setting up the master prompt to begin with something that says inherently challenge my assumptions. Mm-hmm. I think what you're getting at is ultimately that, like, people don't want to be faced with the fact that they suck, or
yeah.
the fact that, you know, they may have set up an incoherent strategy. And maybe, again, that's something that we can all kind of remind each other of as peers, is like, as you're setting up your program, always add a few lines in the master prompt, whether it's an attack platform, a defense platform, or you know, just some kind of policy engine, like, challenge my assumptions, interview me to make sure that you know, you're taking the correct action, those kind of things, right? So maybe it's more of a constructive, make sure you embed the proper challenge. But I think because people defer toward the easiest path, you're going to have a lot more folks just continuing to believe what comes out and problems associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, if I've learned one thing about executives, is they love to be agreed with. They love it. Like, it's crack to them, right? Like, you're a genius.
Well, hey,
yeah, great plan. What's that?
Look at Trump. I mean, you surround yourself with people who love you, and it becomes an echo chamber that doesn't necessarily challenge your authority or your assumptions.
Yeah, I always laugh because I'm like, that's how I view, for me, like a wife. Like, the wife is the ultimate, like, you're an asshole, shut up person.
Totally.
Like, they have total power over you to crush your stupid dreams. Yeah. And I'm like, can I build like an AI version of that? Of like the devil on my shoulder? Like, that's a stupid idea. Don't say that. Like, we kind of need that. And I just don't see that as much, which, to your point about prompting, like, you know, maybe there is room for devil's advocate AI that sort of comes along and analyzes your plans and goes like, that's stupid, don't do that. Yeah. Not necessarily unhinged Grok mode, but like a better version of that. I just think, obviously we're in the very baby steps of this, and I'm learning as I go. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah.
So to that end, and just because I'm curious, because you are one of the people I know who sought out education around AI and really spent time at a deep level thinking about it versus just, I don't know what this is yet, but I'm going to sell it, which is most of security. Like, yeah. I would guess 9.9 people out of 10 people at Black Hat actually don't have any depth with AI. They're just sort of saying it, right? You know, and that's fine. Like, we're all learning.
Yeah.
So if a kid, 22-year-old grad, walks up to you and says, I really want to get good at this, like, where are you sending them? Like, to learn the things that you've learned, like, to kind of guide them a little bit so they become real at this. Like, where would you send somebody like that?
Yeah, I would encourage someone to understand the basics of prediction. If you think about arithmetic gains in like the 50s, 60s, 70s turned into what we now call the computer. Mm-hmm. We could never have thought that when those gains came out. the same way as like, don't start with what is AI as much as like what is a pattern. What does it mean to try to predict what someone's going to say or do? Start there, and then what you do is you add on to that first that principles of perspective, that first systems thinking is like, at Oxford, what they would show is like, here's what a hidden layer actually means. Like it starts with an input, and then it goes into this hidden layer, which is, doing a specific ReLU algorithm, or like they have different algorithms at different stages that you can implement. So, but I would never encourage a young grad to like start at the algorithm or start at the math. I would sort
Mm.
of say like, um, try to understand the inherent difficulty with trying to guess what's coming next. We have a
Right.
lot of data to believe ourselves, but it's inherently a guess. And I guess the reason that's so important to me is like it doesn't, to my point earlier, just have people acquiescing to this technology in the sky. I just see so many like almost spiritual and supernatural language with
Mm.
AI being used. I could send you a whole list, and I'm almost more interested in the ethics of how someone approaches the problem, for the sake of humanity, rather than just getting straight into the technology. There's an example where, as elderly folks age and get placed into care homes, there's almost not enough people in certain states and regions to support that many people
Mhm.
convalescing. And so they're providing people with stuffed animals that have LLMs embedded in it that you can talk to. And that frustrates the shit out of me, because even though there's some sort of like silver lining of goodness, it's outsourcing what should be a human responsibility to look someone else in the eyes
Right.
and start there, as you and I are souls that just so happen to be living right now, and
Mhm.
this is more important than that. And so it's my weird way of saying, like, the way I would start someone young off is like, go anti AI first.
Right.
Really know yourself, know what it means to be human, find out what you believe, develop your understanding of how to think. And then if you want to understand artificial intelligence, remember that it started with us, and that fragments of our brain are being, you know, uh, uh, probabilistically analyzed to become some kind of output that is great and speeds things up, but does not make for a better world by
Mm.
default.
Yeah, I've heard this sort of, it's not anti-AI, it's sort of like almost don't let it fool you. It's not intelligence. It's prediction. It's you know, taking a bunch of data and going, this is what comes next. And it feels human, but it's not. Not
Right.
that it's not getting better every day. It is, but like even the new models, it's like it's just sort of a better engine in your car. But like it's not taking you anywhere that you aren't telling it to go. Sort of like I like that sort of realism around AI. And at some level, it's like it's just a big data Ponzi scheme of just like we just trained it on the internet and it's just a better Google. Sometimes I think that when it answers me, I'm like, you don't actually have any clue what you're talking about. And then sometimes it creates these amazing things. I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I, also at some level, who gives a shit? Right? Like it's a tool in the toolbox. Use it when it makes sense. Don't you like I don't have a deep understanding how cryptography works. I don't. I've been in security for 26 years and I just have never given a shit. I'm like, the nerds, math nerds solve it. I'm using it. Great. Oh, 1024 is better. Cool. Like I just never cared. Maybe that's not as intrinsic as AI to like my human value, but like
Yeah.
also at some level, you have to trust experts are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So like for you within security, then like, what do you think are going to be the valuable skills for the next 5, 10 years that you would tell somebody to learn?
Yeah. Let me do a quick sidebar, and then I'll
Yeah.
that question. So I was just looking up real quick some of the notes that I had taken on this concept of AI ethics, and just listen to some of these. AI is a magic intelligence. These are all quotes, by the way. AI is a
Okay.
magic intelligence in the sky. One AI engineer said, "We are creating God, a digital God." Ilya Sutskever, who's I think the AI chief former from OpenAI, said he's the spiritual leader of the organization, and to feel the AGI. Other
Okay.
people will start off like, "I'm not here to preach," right? There's all these concepts of like, um, it's almost like this Tower of Babel, like everyone's sort of claiming that. And look, AI is the thing that the single biggest thing um, that has been invested in human history.
Mhm.
Never has anything attracted so much capital. So of course, people are going to start to use spiritual language when you're talking about raising money. But I just had to reinforce that because like the authentic side of me, despite the fact that I know more about AI than some, really wants to get back to this idea of like, please, for the love of God, let's all remind ourselves to be human.
Yeah.
Um,
We in my neighborhood we would call that getting high on your own supply, right? Which
yeah,
is like calm down. Like
yeah,
AI is cool, but like, to your point about like the most capital, like at the end of the day, right? Like religion would dwarf it, right? As far as the amount of human capital that's gone into religion to make us feel like we matter. And AI is sort of a similar thing to me. Like it feels like it matters. It makes me feel like I matter, gives me something new to sell and be excited about. But I cannot agree with you more. Is like there's it's not us. It's not supposed to be us. It's supposed to be like a helper. And so I am terrified of the hype cycle. Also, to be candid, I'm terrified of the crash that's coming. Like it's coming for sure. Like there's
mhm.
no way this money is going to pay off in this cycle.
Well,
It
then,
reminds me very much of like Web 1.0, where it's
yeah,
like hype, 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 crash, and then
yeah.
you sort of build something cool from the rubble.
Well,
Feels like that to me.
you just answered your own question then, because if I'm going to, tell someone who's entering the cybersecurity workforce in the next 5 years, like that an inevitable crash is coming,
Yeah, get ready for the crash.
then the recommendation is learn a trade. But all kidding aside, I don't know when the bubble is going to burst. It's certainly frothy. There's something real there, and there's
Sure.
always corrections. Always. That's something I actually like about the American political system is we swing from one side to the other.
Yeah,
Always
we do.
one extreme
Right.
to the other, and we continuously try to find the middle. People are not stupid in that sense. So yeah, my whole point with bringing all of this up is like if I was to try to sort of encourage someone to get into the space, it would be to start by understanding themselves deeply and then get involved. If they were really intent on getting involved in cybersecurity, I think it's a really interesting space. There's plenty of opportunity. You can take care of yourself, your family, and make good money. I think that's certainly something that's attractive about the industry right now. I think you're solving real problems. You're
Yeah.
solving big problems and complex problems. The fact that you and I are having this conversation, not really knowing what's next, but hypothesizing is fun.
Mhm.
Um, I would probably tell someone to start with the cybersecurity basics. You know how right now in coding, like a lot of folks are like, "Well, coding is dead,"
Right.
But if you or I were to build something and serve it up, but not be like a, veteran coder, if something happens or a new vulnerability comes out, like we're not really going to know how to fix it. You know what I
Right.
mean? A coder will know how to fix it. The same goes for training. Like if you're going to be a cybersecurity analyst, don't go straight to agentic defense where all you're doing is clicking buttons.
Right.
Sort of the ChatGPT new keyboard version of like,
Right.
uh,
Yes. 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 Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
But the like, okay, I actually know what it means when an indicator of compromise comes across tagged to a sub technique of MITRE with attribution to APT32, where, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
you need to know what that means. Um, so strangely, it's almost like training becomes more important in that future, not less. Um, of course, to our points earlier, like you have to leapfrog capabilities. It's not just training people to become just standard junior analysts, but it would be spend your first 5 years actually like knowing what cybersecurity means, and
Mhm.
deepening your understanding of specific applications, technologies, protocols, um, even threat actors. Kevin Mandia once said, attribution is a proxy for risk, meaning if you know who you're dealing with, you know what they're capable of.
Yeah.
It's like that kind of stuff. Like I got the benefit of cutting my teeth and starting my career working for the DoD doing web vulnerability scanning and auditing. But I also had a background in national security and intelligence analysis. And so I was always like, how do I connect the dots?
Mhm.
Who's attacking? What are they capable of? What tools do they have? What's their underlying intent and motivation? Well before I just became a tool weenie and a SOC analyst that is sort of responding to inbound alerts. So yeah, I mean, I wax philosophical on this, but I think first 5 years really spend your time establishing a firm foundation on the basics and the fundamentals, and remember that life is bigger than cybersecurity.
Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, but it definitely is. Um, Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking to us about these topics. I think you were incredibly insightful and well versed in AI. Obviously, people can find you on LinkedIn. Uh, you're pretty easy to find, Graham Westbrook, SimSpace. I'll link it in the description too. You are writing some interesting white papers. You're doing a lot of AI stuff, which I think is super relevant. I know you're also doing some advisor work. That's awesome. And everybody should give you a follow. Please don't connect and send them a pitch. But if you're trying to learn AI, this is a great person to follow. It's somebody that I follow and respect a lot. So thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Hey,
Really
likewise.
appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Awesome.
appreciate you, Aaron. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.